Right. Good afternoon, all. My name is Will, and I'm part of the sales team here at Coral Expeditions. Based up in Cairns is our head office. I'm speaking to you from a sunny but pretty chilly Brisbane. I also have a special guest speaker, Ian Herford, hopefully joining us a little bit later in the webinar. He's having a few minor tech issues in joining us today, but hopefully I will introduce you to Ian shortly to give his insight into one of the most vast and ancient natural landscapes in the world, the Kimberley. We are recording this webinar today, and I'll send a recorded version out to anyone attending today, so you can have another look at it as required. We'll also have a bit of a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and I'll try, along with Ian, if he joins us, to answer as many questions as you've got. Feel free to add some questions into the chat section on your computer. I've got a little list of pre-supplied questions that you guys have already asked, which I'll address at the end, but we'll go from there. So look, today's focus is taking you on a journey with Coral Expeditions to give you an insight of the vast and rugged coastline of the Kimberley, which has been shaped by the powerful forces of nature. The Kimberley is steeped in ancient cultures and is one of the most beautiful and remote wilderness areas in the world. For those of you that are new to Coral Expeditions, we've operated for 40 years and always with a single purpose to take small groups of like-minded explorers to some of the world's most remote places with expert guides, warm Australian hospitality and guidance. To begin our Kimberley journey today, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at what you can expect from one of our experienced expeditions in the remote wilderness of the Kimberley region. Enjoy the video, and I'll chat to you in a second. There we go, and that's just a brief overview of what you can expect on our 10-night Kimberley cruise. You can see why Kimberley is a bucket list destination, trip of a lifetime experience, which will hopefully leave you with memories that will last forever. So look, in the 90s, Coral Expeditions completed our first Kimberley voyage as the first ever expedition cruise operator to explore the region. Out of the last 40 years, Coral Expeditions have been operating, 30 of those years in the Kimberley, exploring the Kimberley. Being one of the original Australian flagged pioneers, this has allowed us to curate, what we think is the perfect expedition cruise that the Kimberley has to offer. Our expert guides and crew will share their expansive knowledge and passion for this region from many, many years of experience. In the Kimberley, knowledge and experience is crucial, given the huge tidal flows and the fact that much of the region is uncharted and so remote. All our vessels are Australian flagged, which means we spend more time in the Kimberley, have the best local knowledge, and don't need to spend your valuable time travelling into international waters like so many foreign lines do. Our vessels are operated by mostly Australian, although with a sprinkling of Kiwis on board. And you will get to experience the ultimate kind of warm Australian hospitality throughout your voyage. Whether this is enjoying an ice cold beer or glass of wine or cheeky G&T, sorry, on Veranda Beach, which you'll see in the image there, or on board our vessels, where we encourage that natural Australian style of service and an open interaction between our guests and crew. One where you can, watch your dinner being prepared in open galleys by our chefs, head into the bridge and have a chat with the captain, or just simply sit back and relax in the company of experienced guest lecturers and expedition leaders and other like-minded travellers. This is a true expedition experience. So our 3 Australian flagged expedition ships are purpose-built and designed for the Kimberley region, featuring wraparound decks, private balconies on some of our staterooms, and outdoor dining and bar areas, so you can enjoy those famous Kimberley sunsets. The shallow draft and high manoeuvrability of our purpose-designed expedition ships let us get you closer on coastal adventures to explore the sheltered bays, hidden inlets that are genuinely inaccessible to the larger ships. So just moving on to the fleet, all 3 of our ships, expedition ships, are present during the Kimberley season. Coral Discoverer on the screen now. It's our yacht-like vessel and our smallest vessel, which has 36 staterooms and a maximum of 72 passengers on board. CD, Coral Discoverer, is now 15 years old, but has just undergone a pretty major refit in December this year. Really loved by our loyal regulars, some of whom may be on the webinar today. They love it for the intimate feel and smaller numbers. Coral Discoverer is a domestic focused ship for us, doing the Kimberley season, Cape York and Arnhem Land and the Torres Strait, the Great Barrier Reef, as well as the Tasmanian seasons each year. Coral Adventurer, launched in 2019, has 60 staterooms with a maximum of 120 passengers. A very familiar design across all 3 ships of our fleet, built for expeditions. We've got 2 large 55 square metre suites on board as part of those 60 staterooms, and a range of lovely indoor and outdoor dining and bar areas and seating areas to soak up the views. Outside the Kimberley season, she's deployed into PNG, Papua New Guinea, Japan, Philippines, and parts of the West Australian coastline. Coral Geographer, launched very recently in March 2021, and therefore our newest ship in the fleet. Again, it's a sister ship to Coral Adventurer, so a very, very similar layout, still 60 staterooms and a maximum of 120 passengers. The minor difference to Coral Adventurers, they've got 6 of the big 55 square metre suites instead of the 4, and the internal lift goes all the way up to the Vista Bar on the top deck. When not in the Kimberley, Coral Geographer does trips to the small islands of the Indian Ocean, WA, South Australia, New Zealand, and the sub-Antarctic. As mentioned before, on all our ships, every room is outwards facing and en suite, so you'll never miss out on the view. They are purpose-built for those, subtropic climes where we cruise, with plenty of outdoor al fresco areas to enjoy. So moving on to one of the major selling points of Coral Expeditions, no matter if we're talking the Kimberley, PNG and beyond. These are our Explorer tenders, a product that no other global or domestic cruise line can offer. And these really provide the perfect conduit between our kind of, motherships and the epic destinations that we visit. And they allow us to maximize your time on shore excursions and actually spend your time in the places that you paid, a considerable amount of money to visit. The major kind of selling points of our Explorer tenders is the ability to on and off board our entire ship's complement in under 5 minutes. So again, absolutely no queuing, no waiting. We have a specialized hydraulic mechanism, and they are lowered directly off the back of each of our 3 vessels, basically. So there's no ladders, there's no steps. It's a completely flat, easy to access, and then they get lowered off to the down into the water, and then away you go on excursion. They can seat the full ship's capacity. So on Coral Adventurer and Coral Geographer, our 2 bigger vessels, we have 2 of these Explorer tenders. Whereas on Coral Discoverer, with a maximum of 72 passengers on board, we just have the 1 Explorer tender. A few of the key little points: it's open views for all passengers. They're designed for your comfort or guest comfort. Padded seats, you've got a roof for weather protection, particularly, considering the areas that we cruise in, to a bit of respite from that hot tropical sun, and probably crucially an onboard toilet as well. That just avoids the need to keep returning to the mothership to kind of use the facilities, or to avoid, jumping into the water, or, sneaking off behind the closest bush. So it just gives you that kind of flexibility and convenience, no matter, like I say, whether we're cruising in the Kimberley, Tasmania, or international waters. As far as dock and beach landings and access to our Zodiacs, which I'll come on to shortly, we have front and side ramps, which are absolutely perfect, like I say, for those wet and dry landings. And then we've got the full audio commentary on board, so our expedition leaders can keep you guys, well informed about the sites that we are heading off to see. I mentioned Zodiacs. On all our trips, Kimberley and beyond, we always complement our Explorer tenders with our Zodiac inflatables. And this gives the kind of the perfect full expedition experience. You guys, as our potential guests, have the choice. If you would prefer to stay in the comfort of our Explorer tenders, proximity to the loos, far comfier seats, that type of thing, then happy days. But if you'd like to jump on board our Zodiacs, we use them in conjunction. You can jump directly on board our Zodiacs from our Explorer tenders, and then away you go. But whether or not we're cruising the Kimberley, PNG, and beyond, we always complement our Explorers with the full complement of Zodiac inflatables as well. So Coral Expeditions was one of the first cruise operators to employ interpretive guides on our cruises, a tradition that continues today. Each trip includes a mix of our full-time guest lecturers who join the expedition team, and special guest lecturers who are chosen for specific local knowledge. They immerse our guests on the unique wildlife and environments we visit, and that's what expedition cruising is all about. So, having guided expeditions in the region for over 3 decades, we know the nooks and crannies that others don't. Absolutely crucial, particularly in places like the Kimberley. Our expedition team provide local expertise with a strong understanding of the unique landscapes, geology, flora, fauna, and indigenous cultures of the Kimberley region. Our passionate expedition leaders are on board and take our guests on every excursion, and crucially, we never hand over to land-based tour companies. Pretty much impossible in the Kimberley, but important no matter where we cruise. We focus on more time ashore, with 2 shore excursions daily where possible, and the shore excursions genuinely have 2 options. This may vary from an easy, coastal flat beach walk to a more challenging hike on even ground, to a viewing point or point of interest. The point being that there is always something for everybody. So before I introduce you to Ian, hopefully introduce you to Ian, who is an expert on the Kimberley and joining us live today, I'm going to play a short video from one of our longest serving expedition leaders, Jamie Anderson. For those of you listening in today who are kind of repeat clients with Coral Expeditions, you might well have cruised with him before. He's been with us for 20 years now, and is a true Kimberley pioneer. He's one of the most experienced team members that we have. And again, if you've travelled with us before, you probably recognise his face. So enjoy Jamie's insight into the Kimberley from his years as an expedition leader, and I'll chat to you shortly. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jamie, your expedition leader, giving you the final call. You'll need hat, sunscreen, water, as it will be warm. Optional footwear, folks. Thank you. I'm James Anderson, mostly called Jamie, and I've been in this role for around 17 years with the company. Back in 2002, I was teaching, and I was asked by a friend of mine if I was interested in doing a job. I was fed up with teaching, and so I said, I'll give it a go. He put me on the Kimberley run for the first time. People travelling the Kimberley will see a massive diversification of not only animals and plants, but also the rock systems. Geology is huge in the Kimberley due to its age. It is the most remote wilderness area left in Australia, really. And luckily, it's still like that. It's not overrun yet. More and more vessels are coming in, but at the same time, when it comes down to it, there's still plenty of places you can go without seeing anybody. The remoteness makes it one of the most magnificent trips around. You can't get bored anywhere that we go. Everything's new. The weather changes, the light changes. You've also got the marine side of things. These are with the whales and dolphin. Also going up into river systems that nobody else goes into. It is the most unique reef in the world. It comes out of water, exposes itself twice a day, and it depends on the tidal level as to how much of the reef is exposed. So what we've seen on our cruise this particular trip has been just extraordinary. The indigenous populations, there are three different groups that we go through. We go through the Wunnabal Gambera people, we go through the Warra country, and we go through the Bardi country. They departed basically in 1942, and so we're lucky to go through those particular different areas, and it's nice if we can see them along the way.
Fantastic. Thank you to Jamie. Like I say, if you've met him on board one of our vessels before, you'll know that he's a big character and, like I say, highly experienced, particularly in the Kimberley. And we're pleased that he gave us a go, 20 odd years or so ago. Listening to Jamie, it really goes to show his passion and enthusiasm for the Kimberley, and you'll be in good hands. We're lucky enough, hopefully, to have another enthusiastic Kimberley pioneer live with us here today, Ian Herford. Ian is hopefully going to give us his first-hand knowledge of the rugged Kimberley and cover the highlights you can expect in the 10-night Kimberley expedition, which departs April through September every year, Darwin to Broome and vice versa. All three of our ships operate during the Kimberley season. That we do 50 plus departures each season and have been doing it longer and in more breadth and depth than any other operator. So, Ian, are you online?
Indeed I am, Will. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and that's fantastic news, because whilst I've been lucky enough to cruise in the Kimberley myself last season, I can't call myself a true expert. So just to introduce you, Ian, whilst Ian only started with Coral in late 2021, he was heavily involved with our trips last season and is now thoroughly hooked, I believe. I think your background, Ian, is as a geologist before spending 35 years or the majority of your career with the WA Department of National Parks and Wildlife, I believe. Yep. But look, Ian's going to just give you a bit of an overview of the 10 nights Darwin to Broome, vice versa, the Kimberley cruise. So I'll click to the first slide, Ian, and away you go, mate.
The Kimberley is one of my favourite places in the whole world, and I can honestly tell you that it's a delight to be able to share a few of these highlights with you. As a geologist, of course, places like this, King George Falls, make my mouth water. Leaving from Broome, this is our first excursion made in the Explorers, which you just heard about, like the one that's shown in the photo here. Apart from the beautiful rocks, this is sandstone, of course, the falls are magnificent, and there are two of them. twin falls separated by an impressive rock buttress. They're claimed as WA's highest twin falls at 80 metres. And King George Falls basically is a fitting place to start your adventure. As soon as we leave the ship, the wonder begins as we travel up the gorge, which runs through almost 14 kilometres of the most breathtaking country. There's even a chance we may encounter some dugongs on the way up the estuary. Next slide. Of course, beautiful as it is, the Kimberley's far more than wonderful scenery. During your voyage, you also get a chance to experience several amazing Aboriginal art sites. This is Jamie, who you just heard from a couple of minutes ago, at one of those sites. And some of these paintings date back 17,000 years. You'll see examples of ancient Gwion art, which is what you're looking at here, used to be known as Bradshaw, as well as the younger but visually astounding Wandjina art. It's quite amazing to stand in the presence of these ancient images and to visualise the lives of the Aboriginal people who painted them. And of course, the descendants of those people still live in this country and have a responsibility to look after it. Next slide. Mitchell Falls is one of the jewels of the Kimberley. I first saw it in 1988 during a 2-week bushwalk, and believe me, it will be a highlight for anyone who elects to take the scenic helicopter flight up to the Mitchell Plateau to see it. You enjoy a short walk to the falls lookout and can even have a refreshing dip in the river pools. No crocs up there. You're likely to see plenty of wildlife too, including bird life and maybe even some of the native marsupials. Next slide. This is a place with real atmosphere. The explorer takes you into the mangrove-lined creek channel with exposed mud banks. If I was a saltwater crocodile, I would choose to live in Porosus Creek. In fact, the scientific name of that well-known reptile is Crocodylus porosus, hence the name of the creek, and you are highly likely to see crocs here. But that's not all. There's a wide range of mangrove species, all of which provide habitat for animals, including bats, and of course, myriad species of birds. We often get the explorer driver to cut the engine while we're there, so we can hear the ringing sounds of bird calls among the mangroves lining the creek channels. Next slide. I probably don't have to say too much about this location. The picture basically said it all. King Cascade is simply beautiful. After the rains, the water flows down the rock steps you can see here and creates this lovely scene. If the conditions allow, this is one of the best locations for what we call the Kimberley shower. It works like this. The explorer driver noses up to the base of the falls, as shown here, and then we lower the ramp at the bow of the vessel, and you simply walk out under the fall for a shower in the cleanest and most refreshing water you'll find anywhere. These falls are accessed via the Prince Regent River, which follows a dead straight fracture in the sandstone some 40 kilometres long. And as with King George Falls, which we saw earlier, the journey up the estuary to this location is a treat in itself. Next slide. This is a truly significant site in the early history of Australia. In 1820, maritime explorer Philip Parker King was charting the Kimberley coast in his vessel, the HMC Mermaid. He was the son of Philip Gidley King, who some of you may know was Governor of New South Wales in the early 1800s. Parker King's ship was leaking and they careened her. That is, they ran her onto a beach for repairs. She was on her side for some weeks while the work was carried out, and this included even the men having to make their own nails out of smelted copper. Parker King had the ship's carpenter carve an inscription in a young baobab tree at the back of the beach. And that tree is now grown and is known as the Mermaid Baobab. It carries the name of the ship, HMC Mermaid, and the year 1820. And while at Careening Bay, as the area is now called, you'll also explore the surrounding area and may be lucky enough to see a local bowerbird in its bower. Next slide. Jamie talked a bit about this, and whether or not you've heard of Montgomery Reef, it'll be etched into your mind after you've experienced it. Picture this. You leave the ship in one of the explorers and head out into the ocean, and there's nothing there. Yet the explorer driver stops and waits. Then you notice that the surface of the water looks different. And when you look more carefully, you can see something just below the surface. Within minutes, a reef begins to emerge from the sea before your very eyes. And as the tide falls further, water begins to cascade off the surface of the reef in waterfalls which pour down into the channel in which the vessel's located in this picture. Birds appear from nowhere and begin fishing on the surface of the reef, which still seems to be rising out of the water. When you look down, there are turtles, and if you're lucky, you may see a sea snake or even a crocodile there to feast on the fish and other marine life which wash into the channel. It's an unbelievable spectacle, and it'll stay with you forever. Next slide. It just goes from best to better. This is a true highlight of the Kimberley cruise. I've never heard any of our passengers express disappointment after this adventure. As you can see, for the horizontal falls, we take to the inflatable Zodiacs because they're the best way to ride the rapids through the gap in the sandstone range which forms them. You'll be fully briefed by our onboard experts and fitted with a life jacket, of course. Then it's into the Zodiac where you hold on tight to the ropes either side of you and your driver heads for the falls. Once there, it's brace yourself and you're off up the torrent of water flowing out through the gap. And under the Zodiac, you can actually feel the strength of the current as it surges beneath you. After a quick look at the fascinating basin into which you've emerged and a moment to catch your breath, it's a race back down the falls, which is a different but no less thrilling ride. If there's time, you then get to do the whole lot again. It's an exhilarating experience and something you'll never forget. I only have one slight concern about all this, however. The geology here is really fascinating, but nobody could care less as they're all having too much fun to bother about hearing about it. Next slide. As you can imagine, I'm pretty keen on this place. In fact, it's my favourite bit of rock in the Kimberley, and geologically, it's astounding. Deposited around 1.8 billion years ago as sand in a river delta, these sandstones are so old they don't have fossils in them because when they were laid down, there were hardly any living things on Earth. The layers in this rock outcrop, or beds as geologists call them, started off being horizontal. The rocks were buried deep below the surface where they were heated and pressurized, making them bend like warm toffee into fantastic folds, one of which you see here. There's a small beach just to the right of this photo where we have a bit of an explore. And then on the other side of the beach is another spectacular exposure of folded rock. This place is a marvel. Next slide. I'm starting to run out of superlatives around about here. The Lassipede Islands are fascinating in their own right. They're limestone and sand islands rising a few metres above sea level, but they are a bird watcher's paradise, as you can see here. Even before you reach the islands, brown boobies will fly out to the explorer to give you the once over. These birds are inquisitive and unafraid. One actually landed on a guest's hat. Flying above them are the larger frigate birds. Obviously built for speed, these birds are kleptoparasites. They use their size and amazing maneuverability to harass the smaller birds and to frighten them into dropping their catch, which is then snatched out of the air by the frigate bird. May not seem fair, but it is a living. Depending on the season, you may also see Australian pelicans, eastern reef egrets, several species of tern, including the lesser crested, the crested and the bridled, pied and sooty oyster catchers, common noddies, grey-tailed tattlers, ruddy turnstones, great knots, and greater sand plovers. It really is just the most amazing place. There's a sheltered bay created by a sand spit, and in its clear waters, you're likely to see hundreds of baby green turtles. We also see turtle tracks made by nesting females labouring up the beach. You want to bring your camera for this one, as the wildlife is everywhere and they're so close, it's easy to get great shots. Next slide. I've mentioned some of the wonderful wildlife you'll see on the Kimberley coast, but there's much more. The Kimberley is a tropical savanna punctuated by gorges, flat-top mesas, swamps, rainforests, and to the south, even desert sand dunes. To date, scientists have identified 76 species of native mammal in the Kimberley, which is truly astounding. There are also 295 bird species, 178 types of reptiles, 42 named frogs, and more than 2,000 plant species. You'll see plenty of flora and fauna on this cruise. I already talked about the estuarine crocodile and the huge variety of bird species. Birds you're likely to see include white-bellied sea eagles, Brahminy kites, ospreys, which build huge stick nests along the shore, so you'll see heaps of those. Rainbow bee-eaters, shown here at the bottom left. Beach stone curlews, oyster catchers, eastern reef egrets, and if we're lucky, even a brolga. It's a treat. There are also migrating humpback whales in season, as well as dolphins and dugongs. And you're very likely to see marsupials like rock wallabies, including the western short-eared rock wallaby and the world's smallest wallaby, the monjong, which is endemic to the Kimberley. Dingoes are occasionally spotted, as is the black flying fox. Reptiles regularly seen include turtles and magnificent water monitors. And the flora, of course, is every bit as diverse, with Kimberley icons in abundance, including the remarkable boab, a variety of mangrove species, beach morning glory, mulla mulla, crab's eye creeper, cabbage and pandanus palms, sticky currajong, and my personal favourite, the basalt cycad, because it's so very particular about which rock it grows on. It's a real feast of wildlife, and every day brings new surprises. If you do decide to sail with us, I reckon you'll love it. That's it.
Ian, thank you very much for your insight into the kind of different icons that you can expect to visit on one of our 10-night Kimberley cruises. I'm very glad that you managed to join us, particularly for your geological knowledge, as mine would be far more limited than yourself. So thank you very much for that. Look, we're coming to the end of the webinar now, so it's a good opportunity to ask any questions that you may have in the chat section on your computer, and we'll try to, between me and Ian, we'll try to answer them shortly. To give you a chance to ask a quick question, I'm just going to play the last video that gives you just a quick give you a quick overview of the other two itineraries that are based into the Kimberley as well. So have a little look at this last video, and we'll talk shortly. Right, just before we get to the Q&A, we don't have time in this particular webinar to run you through in too much detail, but we have two more itineraries that are associated with the Kimberley. They're very much very similar, as you can see. So this one, we've got the art and culture of the Kimberley and the Tiwi Islands. It's 10 nights again between Darwin and Broome, departing each year in August and September on board CD Coral Discoverer, our smallest vessel, so a maximum of 72 people. So you can see it still covers all the major highlights of the Kimberley, from the Lassapes to the horizontal falls, King George River and falls, etc. But what we add on it is 2 nights in the Tiwi Islands off Darwin. This is a major kind of indigenous art centre, so you get the opportunity to purchase some unique kind of art products direct from the bars on Tiwi Islands. But we also provide a lot of indigenous interactions and kind of cultural experiences whilst on the Tiwis. So if you've got an interest in the art and culture of these areas, while still wanting to experience like I say all the major highlights of the Kimberley, then this could be the perfect trip for you. And then just one more. We've got the Kimberley Icons, or what we call the Kimberley Icons, Ashmore and Rowley Shoals. So this is, again, very similar to our 10-day classic, Kimberley adventure, with an additional 2 nights tacked on that allows us to cruise far out, pretty much into international waters at Ashmore Reef. Ashmore Reef, Scott Reef and Rowley Shoals, absolutely spectacular areas. One of the questions which has popped up on my screen is, are there any swimming opportunities in the Kimberley? I'll hand over the 10-day classic Kim itinerary to Ian in a second, but Ashmore Reef and Scott Reef particularly are absolutely amazing snorkel and dive locations, basically. We offer full scuba facilities on board if you've obviously got your existing PADI open water certification or equivalent, basically. But for those of you who don't, the snorkeling on the reef there, absolutely stunning. Hundreds of coral species and fish, a lot of them unique to Ashmore and Scotty Reef. And a beautiful kind of addition to our classic 10-night Kimberley expedition. Departs September every year on both Coral Geographer and Coral Adventurer, our two, much more modern ships with the maximum of 120 people on board. So we move on to some questions. So I've had a few popping through onto my phone as we speak, but I'll just crack on and we'll go from there. So we've got a couple for you straight away, Ian. What is the main difference departing from Broome or Darwin, basically, first up?
There's a difference in that in one case you're going south and the other going north. But for my own situation, I don't believe it really makes much difference. Both of them, they have fabulous starts. The first site you go to is astounding. The last site you go to is astounding. And every site in between is astounding as well. So for me, I can't offer you a preference, because I think whichever you decide to do, it's brilliant. The thing is, there's no logical sequence of sites or anything. Every site is unique in its own right. And so the order in which you do them really doesn't matter.
Excellent. And look, on to the next one, which I alluded to just now. Are there any water / swimming opportunities? And before you answer that, Ian, obviously the 10-night classic Kimberley itinerary is in crocodile territory, so they're absolutely limited on the 10-day classic, but there are a few little locations outside of the Rowley Shoals, which I mentioned previously. So over to you, Ian. Water swimming opportunities.
Yeah, not many is the answer. Where we do swim on the 10-day classic Kimberley trip is in water holes up the streams that come into the estuaries. So there are a couple of spots where we can climb up and make our way up through a cliff line safely. Obviously, we put out ropes for you and so on, so you get up there without any trouble. And we swim in a water hole at the top of the cliff line, and the cliff line is sufficient to stop the crocs from getting up there. It doesn't happen on every trip. It's everything in the Kimberley is completely tide dependent. Basically, if we are there when the tide is right, we can go for a swim. But if we're there when the tide is way out and we need to get in close to the base of the rocks, then we can't go. So no guarantees. There are places you can swim, but there are also trips where it just doesn't happen. It's not possible to swim on all trips.
Thank you, Ian. And then another one for you, mate. When is whale season in the Kimberley, or maybe you provide an overview of the different seasons, the waterfall season leading into the whale season?
Yeah, our season runs, as Will said, from April to September, which is basically the dry season in the Kimberley. The humpback whales are on that coast, travelling both up and then back again for between May and December. So basically from now right through to the end of our season, there will be the possibility of seeing humpback whales up there. At the beginning and the end of the season, there is more water in the waterfalls, and you do get storms. Now, if you like storms, that's a great thing. The storms are spectacular and very exciting. I cruised last year right at the beginning and right at the end of the season and got storms in both cases. If you're not so keen on storms, you might want to go for a time a bit closer to the centre of the season. But basically, again, for me, there isn't any best season because the Kimberley just offers up so much. Doesn't matter what time of year you go.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that one. So I've got a couple more here that pretty much I can handle. So you've got the optional extra. So the vast majority of the onboard experience is all inclusive. So with the exception of a potential helicopter flight over Mitchell Falls. So no, that is not included in the cost that you pay Coral Expeditions. But it's bookable on board, usually subject to a minimum of 12 passengers and usually approximately $695 per person to get the old helicopter flight above the falls. And like I say, can be booked whilst you're on board. A couple of easy ones that I can deal with, Ian. Do you need to bring a beach towel? No, we provide beach towels on board. Should I bring a water bottle? Yes, you're absolutely welcome, obviously, to bring your own. But just as a little additional gift for you guys, we do provide a personalised reusable water bottle for you to utilise as required. Is there a dress code on board? No, absolutely not. We usually encourage a relaxed, smart casual. But unlike some cruise lines, there's absolutely no need to dress for dinner. As I touched on at the beginning of the presentation, we're an Australian-owned, flagged and crewed company. We want that kind of informal style of Australian hospitality. There's no assigned seating at dinner, that type of thing. So no, relaxed, smart, casual. But like I say, pretty much wear what you would like. One person just asked about a CPAP machine, sleep apnea, I believe that is. Do we have PowerPoints? Absolutely, we do in all of our cabins. And you just let us know, and we're ensured to provide you with an extension cord as desired. One for you, Ian. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between wet and dry landings?
Sure. You've seen the Explorer in the movie and in the slides. The way we get off that vessel is off the bow. So a ramp folds down at the front of the vessel and you simply walk off the vessel and onto the beach or the rock platform or whatever. Now, in cases where we're nosing up against a rock and getting off onto the platform, it'll be a dry landing. You won't get your feet wet because you're stepping off the boat and straight onto a rock shelf. There are some beaches where we get dry landings as well, but what happens in the Kimberley, of course, is if you get a bit of surge, a little bit of swell coming through onto the beach, then we can't guarantee that you won't have to put your feet in the water. And at most it gets up to sort of mid-calf. It's not deep water. So what we suggest is that you bring what we call wet landing shoes. And these are shoes which are comfortable and sturdy, but in which you can step into the water and then walk up onto the beach. And of course, you can bring your walking shoes with you as well. And there's a chance to change out of your wet landing shoes into your walking shoes on the beach. And we even provide a little towel so that you can get the sand off your feet before you put your walking shoes on. So that's basically the difference. There are some occasions where we just can't guarantee that you won't have to get your feet wet when you step off the Explorer, and we call those wet landings.
Great. And sorry, Ian, there's lots of questions coming in for you. Just a quick overview of, physical exertion, basically. How much walking, hiking is involved in various shore excursions? How mobile should passengers be? What type of footwear? Should they bring walking poles? That type of thing in.
Sure. We don't walk far. If we walked a kilometre, that's a long walk in the Kimberley trips. So most of the walks are shorter than a kilometre. I may tell a lie. There may be one that's a tiny bit more than a kilometre. Most people seem to do it okay. I think walking poles are a great idea. If you've got collapsible walking poles, then you can always stick them in your backpack, and if you don't need them, you don't have to use them. A lot of people wear walking boots, but they're not essential because we're on rock, or we're walking in areas where lots of people go, and so you're not crashing through the bush or anything. You don't need gaiters and full walking boots. As long as you've got sturdy walking shoes, you'll be fine. But if you elect not to do one of the walks, suppose you have a look at it and you think, well, yeah, I don't really feel like climbing up there to look at the Aboriginal art or whatever, there's always the opportunity to have a beach comb on the beach, and often we'll also offer a cruise in the Explorer. So if you don't want to go ashore because you don't like the look of the walk, or you're feeling a bit lousy that day or whatever, you can often stay on board the Explorer and you'll get a guided tour in the vessel along the coast in the area where we've landed. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. I have seen people struggle, do these walks and enjoy themselves, thoroughly enjoy themselves. But it's never compulsory to go on these walks. There's always options if you don't wish to go ashore.
Thank you, Ian. And just a couple more, because I'm very conscious and I've gone over my 45-minute time slot, guys. So thank you for bearing with me. A couple of simple ones. Are there laundry facilities on board? Absolutely, there are. That would come at an additional cost for you. Do you need to take passports? No. So with the classic Kimberley itinerary that we focused on, absolutely not. Likewise with the art and culture of the Kimberley, which is the Tiwi Islands added on. There's a slight grey area when it comes to our icons, which heads out the 12-night trip, which heads out to very, very close to international waters at Rowley Shoals. Technically, no, we've had guidance from the Australian government that no, you don't need to take your passport. A driving licence is sufficient. We do encourage our guests to take their passports if valid, and that is only if there's an emergency for whatever reason, health, weather, where we have to cruise into Indonesian waters. But again, our reservations team will make that very clear to you when you reach out to them. Those are pretty much all the questions that we've got time for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching our Kimberley webinar today. Thank you very much to Ian and your incredible knowledge of the region. I'm very glad that you managed to join us, and it's massively helped me out. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, we make a recording of this webinar. There's a few people I see that were a little bit late joining the webinar, so not to worry. We will email this all out to you so you can kind of have a look at your leisure. We run a regular series of consumer-facing webinars throughout the year. The next one being tomorrow, actually 10 a.m. on Eastern Standard Time, where I'm going to be talking the genuine tropical stunning highlights of New Guinea and Micronesia. So please feel free to join us for that. Other than that, thank you very much. Look, I'm probably biased, as is Ian, as we work for the company, but Coral founded their reputation in the Kimberley. No one can offer the local knowledge and levels of experience that we can offer in the Kimberley. As Ian touched on, you know, local knowledge with the massive tidal ranges is absolutely crucial when you visit the Kimberley, and I think no one can do it better. We've got 50 plus departures each season across our entire fleet. Please feel free to reach out to our genuinely awesome reservation team based up in Cairns. The Explore at email is a direct email for them, and the 1-800 number will get you direct through to one of our consultants up there. Please feel free to reach out to them at any time. For those questions that are still coming through that I haven't had a chance to answer, we'll be communicating the answer to you via email directly. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, Ian. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we see you in the Kimberley soon. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.